Did you hit start recording too? Yes. Good evening. And welcome. Let's start with a word of prayer. Father, we do thank you for this day and for your provision to meet our needs today, your goodness in so many different ways. And even amid struggles in life, we can see your hand of goodness providing the food on our table and the clothes on our back and transportation and friends and the sunshine and many blessings that you give each and every day. We do pray as we meet together tonight. We'd honor and glorify you, and we lift you up. We'll thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, hymn number 25. No, I don't. It's okay. People can look in the hymn book, I suppose. I mean, it doesn't take long to Immortal, invisible. It'll be up there eventually.
Immortal, invisible, God only wise, invite inaccessible, hid from our eyes, most blessed, most glorious, the ancient of days, almighty, victorious, thy great name we praise. Unresting, unhasting, and silent as light, nor wanting, nor wasting, thou rulest in might. Thy justice like mountains, high soaring above, thy clouds which are fountains of goodness and love. To all life thou givest, to both great and small. In all life thou livest, the true life of all. We blossom and flourish as leaves on the tree, and wither and perish, but naught changeth thee. Great Father of glory, pure Father of light, thine angels adore thee, all veiling their sight. All praise we would render, oh help us to see, is only the splendor of light hideth thee.
All right, and we're in Ezekiel chapter 1 tonight. Starting off in the book of Ezekiel. If you want a fun thing to do with Ezekiel, he has the really strange vision to start off his book. In fact, if you look at the book of Ezekiel, and if you have what I have this little thing that breaks down the book. It says Ezekiel's call and commission are the first 3 chapters of the book, which is an awful lot of material for the call. If you look at the book of Jonah, do you know what his call looked like? And the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, arise and go to Nineveh and preach against that great city. You know, that's the call of Jonah. The call of Ezekiel, we don't really even get anything of the call in chapter 1. What we get is just God's presence and God's introduction of himself. And when you look at commentaries, they talk about these beasts that are there, these beings that have 4 faces and 4 wings and hands and feet. And it's got a face of a man and a face of an ox and a face of a lion and a face of an eagle. And so most commentators will say, it's really hard to figure out what Ezekiel was seeing. Now, I have an interesting interpretation when we get down in there, but it's probably not right. But it helped me in picturing it, so I'll let you know when we get there, that part of the picturing. Ezekiel was written when Israel was in Babylon. They were in captivity. And they were a little over 5 years into the captivity when Ezekiel saw his first vision here and got his calling to be a prophet of God there in Babylon. So here he is in Babylon. Chapter 1, verse 1, it says, now it came to pass in the 30th year Now, you'd say, I thought you said it's the 5th year of captivity. Probably the 5th year of captivity. The 30th year is probably referring to how old Ezekiel was when he got his first vision. In the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. So it gives us his setting. He's there in Babylon. He's by the river Chebar. Now, the river Chebar, the name of that river means strong or powerful, which is a really interesting thing there because the river means strong or powerful. The first commentary that I looked at said, Chebar, strong or powerful, was denoting how strong Babylon was and how weak Israel was. Now, that's an interesting thought. But God also appeared to Ezekiel by the river Chebar, and the river Chebar means strong or powerful. So it pictures the strength of Babylon, but I think it also pictures the strength and power of God. And I think that tension is meant to be there. Where you look is going to be how you respond to what's around you. Do you look at the power of Babylon that's holding them captive and say, they are so powerful, what are we going to do? Or do you look at the power of God and say, he's in charge, he's on the throne, everything's going to be okay? And so I think that name of the river Chebar, meaning, and I'm probably pronouncing it completely wrong, but that's okay. When you get to read, you get to pronounce it however you want to. Strong or powerful is a reminder of God's strength and power as much as a reminder of Babylon's power. On top of that, the name Ezekiel means strength of God or strengthened by God, which is why I don't think the main focus of the name of the river is on Babylon's power, but it might have been for Israel at that time. And so verse 2 tells us, in the 5th day of the month, which is in the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, that's why we know it's in the 5th year, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. The rest of this chapter, there's no words from God. There's no command to Ezekiel to prophesy anything. It's just Ezekiel's description of what he saw. And just like when we look at the book of Revelation and we see what he saw, there are things that we don't understand. Ezekiel talks about a wheel inside the wheel. Like, yeah, we got the motions back there, right? The wheel in the middle of the wheel. Can you think of any wheels inside of wheels? What? A bearing, yeah. Some of those that rotate. I mean, a Rubik's Cube has got rotating things inside of rotating things. A gyroscope is a wheel in the middle of a wheel. My thoughts got derailed today, and I was thinking of spinners on hubcaps. And why not? Why might not Ezekiel be seeing spinners on hubcaps? We'll get there, because there's a lot more that fits that we might have described it differently than Ezekiel did. But if you look at pictures or drawings of Ezekiel chapter 1, many artists over the years have tried to paint or draw these beings that we're going to look at that are on top of these wheel in the middle of the wheels, or however they picture the wheel in the middle of the wheels going. Chances are what he was seeing was a chariot with 4 wheels, and there were 4 beings. We'll parse that out a little bit more as we see it. And a throne on it. All of that is kind of described, but I think Ezekiel was overwhelmed by what he saw. But all of chapter 1 is a display of God's power. Why is that important? Israel is in Babylon in captivity. They've got a ways to go in captivity. And God is displaying to his prophet, first and foremost, before the prophet even hears a word from God that he's supposed to share with anyone else, that God is still in control, God is still on the throne, and God is still powerful, despite the fact that they're in captivity. And so the question, the title tonight, who's in charge? I get a kick out of listening to the news sometime. If you do listen to the news, it's best if you get a kick out of it rather than get like whipped up about it. Because I saw some headlines, oh, we're moving forward with impeachment, and now they're going to find out what they need to find out. And then I was in my car listening to NPR, and they're like, they're doing this impeachment, and there's no proof whatsoever. And I love going back and forth between the news sources because they say totally different things. Well, if you're going to get whipped up over what a news source tells you, and the news sources are saying totally different things, you're going to get whipped up over the wrong things sometimes. And sometimes we need to look at Ezekiel chapter 1 and remember, no matter what the Democrats are saying, or the Republicans are saying, or the pundits sitting in their glass newsrooms are saying, that God is still in control. So the display of God's power, it's a reassurance to Israel, and it's giving confidence to Ezekiel that the message God has for him is going to come to pass, and that God is still in control. And furthermore to us today, that no matter what is swirling around us in the world out there, whether it's politics, whether it's judicial type things, whether it's messes in our lives, whatever it is, God is still in control, even when it doesn't look like it. So this display of God's power. First of all, there's power in God's introduction. Verse 4 says, Ezekiel said, I looked, and behold, a whirlwind. Now, whirlwind. Have we heard that somewhere else in Scripture? I heard something. Elijah. I heard it over there, and then it was echoed over there. Elijah went up into heaven in a whirlwind. Now, you think of a whirlwind, and we get this picture of, well, we have the flannel graph pictures, or the pictures from the Sunday school of Elijah going up in this chariot in a whirlwind. A whirlwind is winds that are swirling. You know what we call those today? Tornadoes, yes. Okay. So he sees a tornado. Now, it might have been a pared-down tornado. It might not be like Sharknado movie or whatever, these movies with these huge CGI tornadoes, or some movies had, tornadoes that covered half the globe and that sort of thing. But it was a whirlwind. Not just this gentle swirling breeze that's moving a couple of leaves, but more like a tornado. And then came out of the north, a great cloud and fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof is the color of amber out of the midst of the fire. So we have a whirlwind, which reminds us of Elijah. We have a cloud and fire. Have we seen a cloud and fire anywhere before in the Bible? What? Exodus. The presence of God leading Israel out of Egypt and protecting Israel from the Egyptians. God appeared in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And here's this cloud and fire kind of swirling and enveloping itself. We've got a picture of Elijah. We've got a picture of Moses. You know what's interesting about those two pictures? When you think about Old Testament times, what's the same about Moses' day and Elijah's day? They did have struggles against other powers. What did Elijah do? What's that? He was a prophet. Did he do anything special out of the ordinary? Calling down fire from heaven, might call that a miracle. Moses do any miracles? Yeah, these pictures are meant to evoke for Israel the two periods of history, Moses and Joshua, and Elijah and Elisha, where Israel saw miracles on a somewhat regular basis. That this is how God is introducing himself. There's a whirlwind and there's a cloud and fire. So why does he need both of those things? I bet Ezekiel got the message. And then there was a brightness about it. Out of the midst thereof, the color of amber out of the midst of fire. I think, well, where in the Old Testament times do we see a brightness? Like, well, yeah, the sun. But when the glory of God filled the temple of Israel out there in the desert, or the tabernacle in the desert, when Solomon was worshiping, they had to leave the tabernacle because of the glory, the Shekinah glory of God, the brightness that was there. And so all of these things pictured that God is picturing himself really is just a big display of his power, just in the introduction, a reminder of his power, of Elijah, of Moses, of glory dwelling in the temple. And he moves on, verse 5, also out of the midst thereof there came the likeness of 4 living creatures. And this is great, because when you see Ezekiel's description of the creatures, you really don't know what he was looking at. Later on, these creatures are called cherubs, or cherubim, but these 4 creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of men. Now, of a man. Now, you might wonder what that likeness of a man means when he goes on to tell us that the creatures have 4 faces each, because I don't know any men with 4 faces. So the guess is we've got creatures with 2 arms and 2 legs and a head. Guess their head might have 4 faces, or maybe there's 4 heads, or maybe, again, look at how people draw it. It's amazing the variety that's there, and yet probably each one that did a drawing of it could be right. And everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings. Now, if we deal with the seraphim, there's seraphs in Isaiah. And you remember those seraphs in Isaiah? How many wings did they have? Does anyone remember that one? What's that? 6. Do you know what they were doing with their wings? Because this is going to be like one of these quiz questions, like Mr. Graham leading in Bible trivia. You got to know what they were doing with them. Do you remember what they were doing with them? And you phoned a friend for the last 2. 2, they covered their faces. 2, they covered their feet. And 2, they flew with. Now, these have 4. Does that mean cherubim have 4 wings and seraphim have 6 wings? I don't know. I do know that cherubim and seraphim appear differently at different times. So this appearance may be unique to Ezekiel, and this might not be what they totally look like all the time. But they had 4 wings. And their feet were straight feet. I have no idea what that means. And the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. Okay, that I can picture. And they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. Do you get the idea that maybe Ezekiel's having a hard time describing what these creatures look like? Because that description's really not helping the best. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides. On their 4 sides, they had hands of a man. So they've got 4 faces. You know, which do the hands line up with? We don't know. And they 4 had their faces and their wings. Verse 9, their wings were joined to one another. They turned not when they went everyone straight forward. That's going to tell us that at least 3 times that they go straight forward and they don't turn. And it's just like the cheap remote control cars. Actually, I think I had one of these cars that didn't have a remote. It went straight forward until something underneath caught the edge and it stopped it from going over the edge. And then it would back up and turn, and then it would go straight forward. I don't think it went straight. They went straight forward as in they were unable to turn. I think the going straight forward had to do with just they knew where they were going and all of that. And as we look at all of these parts of these creatures, we see the authority of his servants. There's an authority that's there. 4 faces, 4 wings, hands, feet. The faces, verse 10, as for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and they 4 also had the face of an eagle. You say, okay, man, lion, ox, and eagle. Now that's great. Commentaries have great fun with that. Some people say those 4 faces line up with the 4 Gospels. what's interesting is the four gospel writers. What's interesting is that of the people that say that, they don't agree with which face goes with which gospel. So we're going to throw that interpretation out right away. But when we look at this, remembering that this vision is meant to reinforce to Ezekiel that God's in control. Face of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. I think, well, okay, maybe we should look at those four things. Man, God's creation that's in his image. Man is known for his intellect, for his authority over nature. The lion is known for his majesty. The ox is known for his strength. The eagle is known for his elegance. But we've got mankind, we've got wild animals, we've got tamed animals, and we've got bird animals. There's all different ways you can look at this, but all of those ways point to the fact that these four beasts have an authority that gets over all creation. There's nothing that escapes their authority. I don't know if their faces were able to communicate with those different types of animals, but there's this authority that's there, God's authority in his servants. Verse 11, thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of everyone were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. And they went everyone straight forward, whither the Spirit was to go. They went, and they turned not when they went. They went straight. I don't think that's an inability to turn. I think it's just they went directly where God told them to go. They did not turn to the right or to the left. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creature, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. Okay, so we got 4 different faces, but they've got the appearance of coals and fire with lightning coming out of them, and their feet are like burnished brass, like cows' feet, and they've got hands that are kind of tucked under their wings, and 2 of their wings are upright, and 2 of their wings are down, covering their body, and this is his description. Verse 14, and the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. And they went out and back like lightning flashes. So now we know exactly what Ezekiel's looking at, right? You can picture it perfectly. Ezekiel's only described so far those creatures. And there's great authority in his servants. There's a certainty, straightforward. There's that fire, coals, lightning. All of those things kind of picture judgment for us. And all of it is meant to picture God's authority. Then we get to verse 15, and we read, now as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his 4 faces. Like one wheel upon the earth. The appearance of the wheels, so one wheel for each creature, and the appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl, and they had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as a wheel in the middle of a wheel. And when they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. So we've got this beryl-colored light and these wheels with wheels, and all I can picture is like this really tricked-out SUV with spinners on its wheels and ground effects lighting, and think, what in the world is Ezekiel seeing? I don't think he knows what he's seeing, but he sees these 4 wheels and the 4 creatures, each one by a wheel. Some of them picture the 4 creatures standing on top of the wheels. But I think the wheels likely, are the 4 wheels of a chariot of some type, a vehicle of some type. And when they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. And verse 18, as for their rings, they were so high. Rings. These are the rings of the wheels. We might say rims. As for their rims, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them all 4. Like the rings of the wheels were full of eyes. Everyone can picture exactly what he's talking about, right? The descriptions, the way people describe it, like I have no idea either. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them, And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. And I think, oh great, now I'm seeing a hovercraft. The wheels turned down and lifted up the vehicle, because Back to the Future probably, the DeLorean, flying DeLorean. And like, what is Ezekiel seeing? Well, we're going to find out that these four wheels and what these four wheels are holding up have a throne on it. That this is God's conveyance. I'd say it's his vehicle, but I don't know that we want to, I guess it's a vehicle, but I don't want to picture the SUV with the spinners and the ground effects lighting again. So this is how God is moving around in Ezekiel's vision, and there is this chariot, and there is this glowing light, and there are wheels within wheels, and Ezekiel's having a hard time describing it. I think even if we were to see it today, we would probably have a very difficult time explaining it, although we'd probably understand someone's explanation better because we'd have someone explaining it that's seen what we've seen. And so verse 20, whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go, and the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, and when those stood, those stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of the terrible crystal stretched forth over their heads above. That there's this glory in how God gets around. And we're going to see his throne coming shortly. And I think that throne is sitting on top of whatever these wheels are holding up that Ezekiel is having a very difficult time describing. But when we see people going around, and sometimes we see a motorcade or we see a vehicle pull up that is super fancy or has a gold plated grill or something along those lines, or gold in the rims, or they've got their ground effects lighting or special this or special that, and we think, wow, they've got a lot of money. I think that's what Ezekiel is feeling as he sees what God is pulling up in, that there is a glory to even how God gets around. And it would put to shame the beast, that's the nickname for the president's vehicle. It would probably put to shame any vehicle that we've ever seen, and it's meant to, in the glory that's there. And then we catch God's majesty, because as he works his way up these creatures and the wheels to what it's carrying, the likeness of the firmament was as the color of a terrible crystal. Now there's this appearance surrounding this vehicle and these people, these creatures. And under verse 23, and under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Everyone had two which covered on this side, and everyone had two which covered on that side their bodies. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of a host. When they stood, they let down their wings, and there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let down their wings. God's majesty, there's this appearance, this light, and there's this noise and this sound that's like the voice of God that they're talking about, and his majesty and the noise and the appearance that's there. And that's all an introduction to finally we get to what these creatures and the wheels and whatever vehicle this is. Verse 26 says, above the firmament there was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, and as the appearance of a sapphire stone, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within it. From the appearance of his loins even upward, from the appearance of his loins even downward, I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had a brightness round about. As the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of one that spake. Now, all of chapter 1, we don't get a single word from God. We just get these four creatures with their wheels and this throne and all of this just to show where God is in the midst of their trouble. just to show that when God speaks, he hasn't diminished one bit of his glory, one bit of his power, one bit of his authority, one bit of his majesty. He still turns heads. Now, we've got to understand that this wasn't a special appearance of God because Israel was in captivity. This is God in all time. His power, his majesty, his authority, his the glory that is displayed there. And we get one whole chapter just describing God's presence and the presence of his servants before we get, there's a voice. And we're going to get the start of Ezekiel's call in chapter 2. But Ezekiel's already been confirmed in his mind. They're in captivity. They're 5 years in. They've got a ways to go. But Ezekiel has been reminded that God is in charge. He's still sitting on his throne. He still has all the power and authority and glory that he's ever had. And it's a reminder to us today that no matter what's going on around us, God's still on the throne. He's still got things under control, and his power and authority is not diminished by anyone here on earth that decides they're more important. We're going to go offline for our time of praise and prayer tonight.